After so many months travelling across deserts, mountains, and now on a boat, I decided that sailing through the open sea wasn't much different than riding across the sands. Every few days the Flying Dragon stopped at the coast to discharge trade items and people, and take on new passengers or goods. With each docking, new fees were extracted by a village magistrate or owner of the dock, not fees so much as they were bribes to keep the pirates at bay. But even that did not guarantee safety. The trip moved along at a scheduled pace until 7 weeks out of Jigu. In the dim light of an early morning, the watch suddenly began shouting and rang his bell. Fauzi and I were asleep below, and both of us sat up at the same time in alarm. "What?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. "Grab your things," Fauzi said. "Follow me." "Things? What things?" "Two's bow, your sword, now." And he raced into the hallway and hurried up the ladder. I was only seconds behind him, almost tripping as I slipped on my other sandal. I could hear shouting and the pounding of many feet on the deck. Clambering up the ladder, I poked my head through the opening and found myself in the heat of a frantic, bloody battle. Small brown men in loincloths and bearing swords and knives shouted as they leapt over the railings onto the deck and slashed at our defenders. The captain and his crew were fully engaged, swinging their swords at the attack, while sleepy passengers staggered topside to learn of the noise. The work of death was well underway when I arrived. Fauzi's sword was deployed, taking quickly one man and felling another in the same swipe. Dozens more were climbing ropes thrown to the railings with hooks, and poured into the mayhem, teeth gnashing, swords gleaming in the musky grey light, and shouting their terror in one great roar. I threw the quiver over my shoulder, pulled an arrow and knocked it steady. From the deck opening I stood long enough to spot a target, aim, release, and a man fell backwards into the sea. I drew another, knocked, aimed, and let fly, finding its mark through the neck of a swordsman who instantly fell, dropping his sword. I drew another, and then another, until all the arrows were spent, and then I pulled my sword to join the fray. The deck was slippery with blood. Screaming men limped for mercy, begging the brown swords to restrain, but the blades were cruel. I slashed and clashed, finding the pirates in their legs and arms, their backs and necks. A blade grazed across my shoulder, searing pain followed, and I turned to see another who was determined to stop me. I twisted my body in time to miss the follow-up, and struck at the man's loins. He crumpled, screaming, as I turned just in time to stop a downward slash from another. We exchanged 3 quick strikes before I ran him through. The fighting continued in heated exchange for several minutes more, until I found myself backed against the woodworks of the captain's quarters. Fauzi was at my side, with a dozen swords suddenly raised against us, but didn't strike. They had pinned us back. I was breathless with panic. "Do we die fighting, or do we negotiate?" I called over to Fauzi. "Negotiate," he said. "Look at them. They could strike us down, but they don't. Their leader wants to talk." Another brown man with a loose red shirt and laced leather boots that climbed halfway up his lower legs approached us, parting his men and sheathing his sword. With a gruff frown, he pointed angrily to the deck, shouting a threat. We dropped our swords. "You Western, no?" he demanded. "Yes. Nafud, Syria, Rakim," Fauzi said. "You here trade?" "Yes, long time," Fauzi replied. "Stay! No, go!" he commanded. I swallowed hard. The swords pressed against us were smeared with crimson, evidence of that morning's work. I shuddered to think whose blood it might be.